Hello, hello, fellow friendly Agorians. We are back with another conversation with today. We have Kirby Atkins. I think you've probably already seen some posts on his profile with from the help of course, none other than Scott, who has been always the one putting out all the important messaging when we have great conversations like this for you. So I'm going to just bring in David because he's going to do a bit of an intro, and we're going to jump right into it. Hello.
Hey, Brent.
How are you?
Do you see me correctly? Because I actually just see a still frame of your face.
I see you fine.
Okay, perfect.
And you're connected to the actual wired internet today?
I should be, but as soon as we start the discussion, I'm going to make sure that all my settings are fine. You know, it's a never-ending battle. Me and Wi-Fi and internet plugged in. Anyway. Yeah, exciting. I'm really looking forward to this conversation that we've been talking for some time of having Kirby Atkins with us. So that'll be, very looking forward to it. So for those that might not be familiar with Kirby, actually started as a character animator in the 90s, worked at Leica for a couple of years, then did a little bit of writing and directing. Came back to animation, worked at Sony and Weta, and at some point he had this crazy idea of making his own animated feature. And by saying his own, I mean writing, directing, doing all of the storyboard, being involved in financing and all that. So that's going to be super interesting to explore as a topic. And he's now the head of development at Brazen. So a lot of value, hopefully, we can bring with this discussion today to our audience.
Yeah, lots of, obviously there was a learning curve there, so I'm particularly interested to hear all of the craziness that ensued for him to be able to accomplish such a tall and glorious goal. So let's bring him in and pick his brain. Hello.
Hello.
We were just talking about you. I don't know if you know. But
yeah.
Welcome to the conversation, my friend.
Awesome.
It's good to be here. So.
Yeah, let's do this. We have the habit of diving right into some topics, and for my side, I mean, I'm very tempted to just start with the main course of what we'd like to discuss and dive right away into the production of mostly your animated feature. So let's say for those that might not have had the chance of seeing it or being aware of it, I would say, how did it started? Just the idea itself of, hey, what if I write my own movie and do it, because this is how it's done, right?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because these things, everybody gets into this business for different reasons. I mean, some people love just animation and they love to just study movement and get into the minutia of acting for animation or effects or whatever. And for me, it was always just a means to an end, because I had just a bazillion stories in my head. And as you guys know, I'm sure anybody who works in this knows, is that there is something that I think Camus called the gentle indifference of the world, which is basically that the world just doesn't really care if you have an idea or not, or if you have a story, if you have a movie, or if you have something. And so it's interesting because either that indifference that the world has toward you and your ideas and and telling your own stories and all that kind of stuff, either that's enough to squash the enthusiasm you have to do it, or the enthusiasm you have to do it can outlive just a bazillion discouragements that come your way. And for me, it was always just the fact that I had movies playing in my head, and I could draw, and I could act a little bit, and so I just thought, I'm just gonna start making this thing. I'm just gonna make it. And for me, I had been just real quickly, I'd been directing on the Jimmy Neutron TV show for Nickelodeon. I was at DNA Studios for a while. So I was doing some of this stuff, but I was mainly, and I was writing scripts. My big sell was to Robert De Niro. I sold a script to his company, Tribeca. And usually the thing was, so I had two careers going on at the same time. I was animating and directing a TV show, but I was also writing spec scripts for features. The thing that would always just blow my mind is how after I wrote these things, they would go into the machine of the industry and be turned into hamburger. You just didn't recognize what you had made anymore, after it had gone through so much of a process. And so I always felt like, as an artist, as a creative person, I always felt like there's got to be one thing that I'm going to do the way that I want to do it, because the movie playing in my head, it's a good movie. I'm seeing it all the time. I take long showers and long walks, and I see this movie in my head, and I know it's good. And so I've got to dig my heels in and at least do one part of my creative life that I'm not just going to hand over like a sacrifice to the machine and have it be turned into something that I don't want it to be. And but again, the only way you can really do that is to not ask permission from anybody and not wait for somebody to hand you $20 million or whatever. You just start. You just actually just need to start making it, and you just need to have enough sort of respect for your own idea that whatever amount of work you're willing to put into other people's stuff, you need to be able to at least put that much work into your own stuff. And so I pretty much started creating the film through storyboards, and I was writing as I was doing storyboards. I would write, I would make a sequence, I'd see if it played just to me. And before long, the thing started to play. It started to really play nicely. Yeah. And my daughter, I created these creatures called Thorophants, which were the idea of Mosley is that basically we have these creatures, that 4-footed creatures that are beasts of burden and work out in the fields for farmers and whatnot. And they discovered that their ancestors used to walk upright and have hands. And so what happened to cause these creatures to de-evolve? So I needed voices for the animatic. Obviously, you need voices to do that. And so I got my 6-year-old at the time daughter because she was in my office with me. And I would be drawing, and she would be drawing too. She'd be drawing. She knew the story backwards and forwards, just like any storybook that we would read to her at night. And so I thought, I'm just going to get a microphone.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm going to get on the floor, and we're going to play the story. And just like if you get Robin Williams in the sound booth and he starts making crap up, and it's like, oh, that's great. Well, she would do that. She's 6, and she doesn't know she's acting. She's playing. Playing. Yeah. And what was coming out of that was so great that I actually just rewrote the script as she would do these different asides and stuff. And the chemistry just between us playing off of each other. I'm improv with a 6-year-old kid, right?
Yeah.
And it started to play really well. And so long story short, I'd made the entire movie in boards and with me and friends doing voices, and particularly me and my daughter doing the main voice. And one thing leads to another, and the New Zealand Film Commission and China Film Group are wanting to do a co-production. People are turning in scripts for animation, but I had not only a script, I actually had the movie. And so it's sort of, Steve Martin says this thing, and I think it's completely true. When you're dealing with the gentle indifference of the world to your work, is that you've got to be so good. You got to make something so good that it's more work for them to ignore you. And so you make it, and you make it as good as you can make it, and you make it so good that they actually have to work harder to ignore that you exist. And so it was to the point to where they were like, it needs to be a no-brainer. People need to look at it and they go, well, yeah.
how is this movie not already made?
How are we not making this? And so
Yeah.
that you end up sort of solving those problems about getting through the gatekeepers and all that other stuff by just having this work ethic that that you believe in your own stuff as much as you believe in some franchise that already exists. You have to believe in it that much, you know. Otherwise, I think you're just going to get too discouraged. It's such a long journey. So,
yeah, I'd like just to take a step back and come back to what you mentioned of, you know, there was some your script that was purchased by Robert De Niro company. For those that are not aware at all of how it works in the industry when a script is purchased, or, you know, there's an order for a script, and how would you describe the mechanism of how from an idea to a script to something that would maybe eventually greenlit? What are your observation of how this entire thing is working in general?
Well, I tell you, it was a spec, and specs don't sell anymore. They call it spec script, where you basically have an original idea and you write the script, and then you know, I guess the hard part a lot is to get an agent and to do all these things so that they're shopping it around. It was a different world back in the early 2000s, late 90s when I did that, to the point where people were buying original stories more. Now we're doing multiverses of Spider-Man and Batman. I mean, how many of these things are we going to get before we double bursts on that thing?
Yeah.
And so for me, I like the idea of going to a movie and it's a completely original thing and I haven't seen it before. I still think that is important. And so in a lot of ways, I had an idea. I wrote it out. The hard thing when you're writing a script is you're like going, who is this for? You're asking yourself this question constantly. Who cares that I'm doing this, you know? Because it's just this private world. It's a very, very private world to where you are going through acts and characters and story arcs and all these things. And you don't know that, and you're making a bet that somebody is going to give a crap if you finished, right? And the general rule is if it moves you and it speaks to you, it's probably going to speak to somebody else too. But you have to weather that that part of the process so that you have a thing. I think a lot of people start projects, they just never finish them. And so the big challenge is you got to finish it. You got to finish the thing you're working on. You have to finish it, because you can't go out and shop just an idea like, hey, I got an idea. Will you pay me to write the script?
No, not anymore.
The answer is going to be no. We're not going to pay you to write script. So you do it, you make it to and you put it in such a form that when you deliver it to somebody, they're taken aback by it. And they're like, oh, okay, well, this is kind of cool. And why shouldn't we do this? And so I ended up just writing these stories that, and I sold a script to Miramax. I sold that one to Robert De Niro. Never met Robert De Niro, by the way, but he bought my script. You know, I mean,
that's a claim to fame.
And when you mentioned it got turned into a hamburger, what did you meant by?
Well, there was a guy at DreamWorks who was attached to direct it. I wasn't going to direct it. They didn't want me to direct it. They want to buy your script, give you money, and you go away. You go away, and they'll still pay you, you know, and so it's a weird how they pay you, because they'll option the script. They'll usually ask you to do a rewrite and work with the director to rewrite it according to his vision and specifications. Well, I did that and they liked my rewrite, but then the director wanted to do a rewrite. And then at one point in the mail, this is when we still got things in the mail, I guess, I got a script of the director's rewrite of my script. Oh boy. And I read it and I'm like going, I don't know why they're still paying me. This doesn't
unrecognizable.
This doesn't look like anything that I made, you know. And I'll take the money, but it ends up going to where you're like, how is this can I keep doing this, or is this what my creative ethereal life is going to be? Is writing stuff that by the end of the process, and filmmaking is a collaborative process. It can't be anything else. You got hundreds of people working for you. But the films that I love, particularly in animation, if you think about the ones that we all love the most, like Brad Bird, The Incredibles, right? That is Brad Bird basically taking the entire machine of the studio system of making a film. And so hundreds of people working on this thing. And yet, nevertheless, you still feel like Brad Bird's voice is coming out of the script. You still feel like it's a personal thing. One guy sharing his gut with you. And that story is basically a metaphor of a man going through a midlife crisis. We're looking at Brad Bird telling you about his midlife crisis. That's what that movie is. And that's why it means so much to us, because it feels like the directors, it doesn't feel like a corporate, it doesn't feel like a corporate product. It feels like Brad Bird's talking to you, and he's using the mechanism of a gigantic machine of the industry, of the movies, but you don't feel like he is lost at any point in that process. You feel like his voice is absolutely present. That's the challenge, I think.
So I can understand that a Brad Bird has the weight and the reputation to stick to his vision. And how did Kirby Atkins, with his first movie, has been able to weather the storm? And because I don't think that your script has been altered that much by the production from your original vision, right?
Not much, mainly because for a lot of reasons. I think the more money that you have, and when you're working with a gigantic studio, Mosley only cost $20 million, which is not a lot for an animated film. And so I had to be very intentional about where the money went, so that it was on the screen and you felt like the production value was just top. And but I've been a part, and I'm sure you guys have been a part of a lot of films to where they'll recast a main character after they've gone into production, or animation will begin on a sequence and then they'll rewrite that sequence, and and that costs money. That costs a lot of money.
That's never happened to me ever before.
Of course not.
I was just always stunned, even just on the animatic level, how they would lock the animatic and then they would just dig up all the foundations again based upon some focus group or something like that, right? And so the great thing was that because I had solved the major problems story-wise in private, in a private process, making this myself, when it was time to screen this to people, my goal was I wanted the executives and the financiers to sit down in a screening room, forget they were watching an animatic. I wanted them to get so engrossed in the film and forget that they were looking at drawings. And basically, by the end of it, I wanted them to go, "Oh, well, that's great. I actually cried at the end of it, and let's go. I mean, what do we need to do?" So we actually skipped a whole lot of what is redundant sort of pre-production, and I got to sort of make this in a private way. And also, I had to sort of have a producer's hat on too, because I had to think, how am I going to keep this cost? Because if I start going over budget, you're done. You've got to be more serious about staying in those brackets than the producers are, because they'll cut your feet out from under you if they feel like you're getting scope creep on this thing. And so in a lot of ways it was, but there was a lot of luck involved too. The Weinstein Company was going to distribute the film at the beginning before Harvey Weinstein got into a lot of trouble. And one of the odd lucky things was I got to play the main character in the film too with my daughter. And so I voiced the character of Mosley as well. And the only reason why they didn't cast somebody else in that thing was because Harvey Weinstein watched the Animatic, and he saw this dynamic between me and my daughter, and he's like, "Well, we don't want to, if that's not broke, you don't fix it, right? So we'll just front load the rest of the cast with names that people know and keep this guy playing Mosley." So I got to play the lead in the film too. But again, it all has to do with the fact that you have to, or that for me, it was a matter of, I wanted it I wanted when I presented it to whoever was putting the money up, I wanted to present it in a way to where all that they were giving me was the best possible feedback.
Mhm.
So you have to be you have to be very critical of your work before it becomes public. And you have to then fix the problems yourself, get to there before, if somebody says, well, it's not, we need a lighter moment here in this sequence because it's getting awful dark. Well, I need to be ahead of that. I need to know that and fix that before it becomes a note.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so in that regard, I got to, by doing this sort of stuff in a private way before there was any money involved, I kind of solved a lot of those bigger problems before they started spending a lot of money.
Yeah, this is usually why many production are so expensive, because it's like a house of cards. I mean, you remove this little part here, all of this is crumbling as you're fixing this other thing, and you know, one thing is leading to another, and then you have a couple sequence to fix, and you're already on a payroll with 100 artists that are rolling their thumb. But I got to say, for those, you still have some of those animatic, right, on your website?
I do, yeah. I mean, so if you go to Kirby.Atkins.com, you can see actual sequences of the film as they existed in animatic form. So.
And I got to say, just the way that you've edited those sequences with the sound, with the parallax, with the little motion and all that, I mean, you see the sequence and you see exactly where it is going. I mean, Alberto Mielgo is another director I have in mind that is creating those storyboard or those animatic sequences. And like, yep, let's do that, and it'll be great. How was it part of your initial master plan to do animatic for the entire movie, or it's just because the amount of years that it was in between the writing and getting money, that like, well, might as well storyboard the entire thing if I have some time?
All right, well, here's the thing. So I recorded my daughter, who's still in the movie and is one of the main characters in the movie, at 6 years old, and just one beautiful little performance, right? 6 years old. By the time we started actual physical production on the film, she was going to college.
Oh man.
Yeah,
that's resilience.
that's how long it took. And so I still had all these audio recordings of her that I did on the floor with a cheap mic. And then we also have John Rhys Davies, who's Gimli in Lord of the Rings. We have Lucy Lawless, who's Xena Warrior Princess. We have Rhys Darby. We have Tamara Morrison, who's Boba Fett. And all these guys are getting their audio recorded professionally in Auckland. And then I hand over this audio of my daughter and go, can you clean it up and fix it? Because and of course they want to go, well, no, let's just record it again. We'll find another kid. And I'm like, no. This is what made the movie work.
Yeah.
This is what made the movie work. And so I'm going to count on you geniuses to clean it up and make it sound like it belongs up there with John Rhys Davies and all these guys. And they did. I mean, they can do this. And
I've got to say, it doesn't show, I couldn't hear the difference.
That's amazing. I mean, and so why would you gut what is working? You know, you don't do that. The thing.
Yeah, it's like the soul of the film, right? In many ways. Yeah.
Exactly. And that is the thing that I had to believe in for 15 years, right? That this works. And it's just a matter of, it's really waiting for the world to catch up with what you already know.
Yeah, it's so funny, this topic, because I feel like I've talked about this in many different ways and different angles, because it's like a theme that comes up in life a lot. It's the idea that like real true creativity, unfortunately, and especially today's day and age, goes through a very technical process to get done. And so people will always speak up in their, the experts, and the experts are gonna be like, well, we can't possibly put this out like this because of this and because of that and because of like frequencies and frames per second. And like, honest to God, at the end of the day, when you go through enough of those changes just to make it technically precise, it's no longer like the reason, like the raison d'être is completely divorced from the actual property that actually ships. You see that? Absolutely. You see my French, David? Not bad, huh? Not too bad.
Pretty good. Yeah.
That's absolutely true. And the fact that we put on these films, we put so much spit and polish on them, that we that we polish it to the point where it doesn't have any.
Yeah, I know. It's like it's just polish, and it's no longer. Where's the substance, right? Yeah,
Absolutely. And what you want, what an audience wants, is they want to feel connectivity
totally.
to characters and to
Yep.
situations. But
Yep.
this was also true in regard to certain aspects of the tone of the film, because there's certain parts that I wanted to feel like there's a fight at the end of the movie, and I didn't. There's a big fight at the end of the movie, and I didn't want that fight to feel like a fight in a cartoon. I wanted it to feel like I wanted to feel like a fight where somebody could get hurt, right? And in order to do that, it had to get dark and it had to get scary, and then there's a big, feel good moment toward the end. But I kept having to really convince the financiers and producers, we can't just. It's sort of like telling a joke and just saying, let's forget the setup. I'll just cut to the chase and give you the punchline. It's like, well, that's not a joke then. You have to do the setup and then the punchline.
Totally.
And so we think in order for the highs to be high, the lows got to be low. If you're too scared that the lows are too low and you start, then the highs aren't going to, and everything tastes the same.
Yeah.
So that you have to have contrast, and they were worried. They'd be worried at times that things were getting too scary or too dark. And I'm like going, but if we don't go deep in that hole, when we shoot out of that hole, it's not going to feel as good.
Totally.
So they would go, and they would agree with me, but they'd be going, yeah, but we haven't seen anything like this before. And I'm like, that's great. Why is that wrong? Why is that bad?
Yeah, sounds like a good thing to me.
People are, and I understand it's a lot of money people are
totally
into these films.
Yep.
I completely get it, and it's a risk. And so, in order for these folks who finance these films to feel like the risk gets lower, they just want to do what was successful last time. They just want to repeat the last thing that they saw was successful. And so,
risk mitigation, right?
I sympathize with that, but we also need to encourage these folks that, trust me, this will feel the audience will respond to this, but we really have to be true to any given moment in the film. If the moment is a serious moment, let's not betray it with a laugh. Let's let it be what it is, and then let's earn the laugh and let's earn the dramatic moments. And why can't animated films do this? Why do we think, well, that's every other piece of cinema, but animated films have to cater to the youngest audience and have a fart joke in there? Why? Who said that has to?
Hey man, fart jokes are hilarious, Kirby. Lay off the fart joke hate, okay? Jeez.
Because there are some movies with fart joke that made more than $1 billion in box office. So that's probably the main reason.
Why fart jokes? Because statistics. That's why.
That's right. There's focus groups on these farts.
Kirby, I there's something I wanted to ask you going into this conversation, and I think this is a good time to talk about it, because you talked about money and like mitigating risk. And I mean, I find it interesting because, like, yes, there are a lot of people, a lot of investors who line up to be able to provide the money to produce a film like this. And it requires, obviously, a filmmaker like yourself to try to protect it as it goes through that process in many ways, right? And then they need to trust you. There's a lot of things that need to go right for a good film to get out there. But I think that, like you touched on it earlier, the beginning, like the nucleus of this, it required you to kind of pro bono this thing. You did a lot of time and a lot of energy and like a lot of emotional, personal energy, including your daughter, to lay down the fabric that inevitably led to people being interested. Or like you said, it was too much of trouble to ignore because it was just too good to ignore, right? So I'm just curious, like, how do you in your mind manage that level of, time commitment? Because you're a dad, you're a family man, you got a job. Like, how could you have possibly put that time together, and how could you justify it in your mind? Because it could have very easily, the odds were not in your favor. This could have very easily not gotten made. So how did you parse that in your mind?
Or it could have blown up in my face midway.
Sure.
So
lots of things could have happened.
I would have nightmares of Orson Welles and Richard Williams telling me, do not put too much of yourself into your own work. Diversify your portfolio, damn it. I mean, don't don't put too much of your own heart in, because you're going to get your heart broken, right?
Yet.
And yeah, and I got to say, and I got friends who were teachers, professors, and doctors, and I often envy their path because, hey, you get this degree, you jump through this hoop, you're a doctor. Congratulations. That's all you got to do. The path in this business. It's not that way at all. If you're going to be a creative person, you don't get those well-worn grooves, those career paths already set for you. If you get this degree, if you go through this program, you get to be that thing.
That's so true.
In creative life, that is not the case.
That's so true.
And so I've never known any director, I've never known any artist, I've never known any filmmaker who you repeat their path and you get to do that job.
Yeah.
Everybody has to dig their own niche out and make their own slot and then fill that slot. There are no pre-dug slots for you. You have to. There's no other way to do it. I wish there were. Like I say, I envy my friends who are not in this business for how predictable the path is for them. But it's not. So to enter into a creative life, to decide that this is what you're going to do, you can't just hate the chaos. You got to see it as just, because if you keep waiting for something to come along that's predictable, you've got to, and that's why as they say, if you're going to get into stand-up comedy or something like that, if you can do anything else, if you could be happy doing anything else, God, do that. I mean, but the fact is that I could do a lot of other work, and the whole time I'd be doing different work, I would have movies playing in my head, and I'd be going, I would be entertaining myself with my own private stories, and I'd just be looking, and I'd be groping for an outlet, some place to put that, right? And so I think, unfortunately, that is the only way that this works, is that you really do have to get comfortable. And here's another thing too, is I really do think that if you keep waiting for that moment where somebody's going to give you $1 million or whatever to do your thing, your heart's going to get broken too many times. It's all rejection. No. So you better love doing it for other reasons besides that day that it all works together. You better love the process of it. You better love putting that story together in private. You better get enough joy out of that in private to keep you going. Because if you're only waiting for that day when it pays off, then I mean, how much disappointment, how much heartbreak can you live with? And it's a finite amount.
It's interesting because you kind of turned that whole project into this fun journey with your daughter, which I'm sure you're going to cherish for the rest of your life, because I mean, like, she was 6, like what a precious time to be spending that kind of time creatively with your daughter. At the end of the day, if it all blew up, you would have at least been left with that beautiful memory of building a story with her. Right. So
it's ended up being a time capsule for our family. And oddly enough, a metaphor for, I mean, the whole story ended up being a metaphor for our family going through the process of trying to make the story. But as I've told my wife, I can't do this a second time. I can make another thing, but I can't have another kid wait another 20 years, and I can't put what am I going to put my grandkids in the next one? I mean, so the next thing will not be anything close to what the first thing was. You have to reinvent the wheel every time.
You got to drill a new like mine, I guess, right? It's like you can't keep tapping the same vein over and over again.
And I do get encouragement when I do hear other directors and interviews with directors. I don't know very many directors, so I usually, when I find these interviews, Guillermo del Toro, hearing his interviews always encourages me, because he seems to be able to articulate this stuff really well. But it is a sense that there is no film that is you never repeat the same process to make a different film. You go through a whole different set of hurdles, a whole new different set of challenges. If it's a different film, it's going to be a different process to make that film. So
I think this is why there's a lot of directors that try to always work with the same team, the same DP, the same editor, maybe the same writing team as well, because there's already so much chaos that if at least you can go with your team that you've been, facing the storm before, it's going to give you a little bit of confidence that you can do it again.
I completely get why people do that. Directors carry certain actors with them into other projects, because if you've got just one element that is familiar, then it doesn't just feel like complete chaos.
Yeah. I also really like when you mentioned that, it's as being creative people, it's a blessing and a curse. I mean, it's great to have all of those ideas in our head, but at the same time, and when you mentioned that you have this movie, and you could be a doctor, but you would have all those ideas and be like, the frustration of not being able to express them creatively. I mean, it's one of the reason as well when we started Agora and even Agora.Community with Brent and the others. It was like, why are we doing this? Because if we don't, we're going to hate ourselves, because either someone else is going to do it, or it's just never going to happen, and we'll always have regrets of, why have we not done this thing? So at some point, it's because you're motivated and inspired to do it. It's also because you fear that if you don't do it, you're going to regret it.
Absolutely. And I think Jim Carrey put it this way. He said, you can also fail at what you hate doing. Which is
very true.
And I think he's referring to his dad, who was a real creative guy, and yet he ended up having some stupid job, and he was horrible at it. And so if you're going to fail, at least fail doing the thing that you love. I mean, totally. You could fail doing the thing you hate. And so
that doesn't sound like very much fun.
No, I mean, and there's a certain point where you have to embrace, all right, this is the life. So let's go, let's play ball, let's make stuff. If we're storytellers, let's tell stories. Come hell or high water, by hook or by crook, we're going to tell some damn stories. And the world can pay attention if they want, and if they don't, they don't. But they probably will if we're loving this and as much as we love it. Somebody's going to pay attention, and so you just keep doing it with that kind of a motivation behind it.
Yeah. During the entire, I'm curious. During the entire process of Moses' production, I'm curious to know, when did you feel the most out of your comfort zone?
Well, directing, I thought, in the actual physical production process, I knew the least about lighting and lighting and comp. And so I was really depending on other people to, I knew what looked right, and I would grab frames of other films and I'd say, what do we do? How do we get there? And, but lighting and comp, just as far as a process, was the most foreign to me. The thing that was scary but cool, I gotta say, was when I had John Rhys Davies, who's Gimli and Lord of the Rings. He's in Indiana Jones, all these films. I had Rhys Darby and Lucy Wallace, and I only had them all for 3 days. I had no callbacks, right?
Wow.
And so
no pressure,
but
no safety net.
But it was they either have them for 3 days. I had to make, this is a choice that you got to make. These are scary choices where you're like going, look, you can have them for virtually unlimited days and callbacks. But I'm never going to be in the room together.
Exactly. I knew you were going to say that.
And I'm like, damn, that I've seen that. I need these people in the room together if I'm going to get the juice that I need out of any particular moment. And so I made a decision, an executive decision, that, okay, I choose to only have them for this amount of time, but I want them all in the room together. And I was acting with them at the same time. So I'm not only directing their performance, but I'm acting with them in the scene. And but there was this great moment. There were a couple of great moments with John Rhys Davies, who is, you guys know him. He's Gimli, and he's in Indiana Jones. And so we're doing this intense scene together. And so and it's a very emotional scene. And I'm looking at his hands while he's reading. I'm just looking at his hands for some reason. And those are the hands that picked up the Lost Ark with him.
That's awesome.
And
Why would you intimidate yourself like that? That's crazy.
Because I'm like going, oh my God, I go going, Kirby, you can wig out later. Right now, you gotta get this scene done. You can hero worship later. It's time. You got to do this job.
Yeah.
But he was great because there'd be a moment in the scene to where he'd go, this isn't working for me. What if we said it this way? And then he would do it, and I go, yes, let's do that, And so, and then but in my mind, I'm going, now, if he says that, am I missing something that's gonna need later? And so it was the most exhausting 3 days that I spent in production, because it was get everything you need that you were going to be drawing from for the next year and a half. Right.
Yeah.
And you're going to be drawing from those 3 days for the next year and a half.
No callbacks.
I had to get everything then at that moment. And lucky, and there were a couple of weird moments in editorial where we're like, we didn't get that line.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, well, what if we and we made it work. My editor, Kathy Toon, who was from Pixar, came to New Zealand to help me on this. And by the way, we had a small crew, but we had a great crew. I had Morgan Loomis from Weta came and left. I mean, these guys left really great paying jobs to get paid almost half. But it was their motivation was the same reason as me. It's like, somebody needs to make a movie like this. This is our chance to make a movie like this. We always wish somebody would make. And then we can go back to our jobs that are paying us a lot of money.
Yeah.
And they were great. They were fantastic.
Well, I think those are all adding up to create a movie that has a lot of heart, like Mosley has, because it's a story, that is personal to you, that you've been able to, refine enough over time. So it keeps the essence, but you kind of fix all of the problem. You're able to keep the voice of your daughter, which then they do magic, because I didn't notice at all that it was a bad recording. And on top of that, you have the actors in the booth together. One of the first time I heard, because usually animated features, everyone is recording their voice and then they kind of put this together. It was on Surf's Up, and I felt that, wow, the in between those penguin character, it feels that there's something. And it's afterwards that I saw that, Shia LaBeouf and Jeff Bridges were actually together in the booth, and it was something that was not usual to have both actors to feed off each other's energy. But it's not like people can tell the difference, but in terms of delivery, energy, emotion, and all of that, it makes a difference. So
fantastic. Mr. Fox also did it with Clooney, and I think Meryl Streep was in that. And but you can tell, it's palpable. It's just palpable, because acting is, as they say, reacting. It's hearing what your friend is saying and giving a response to it, and the script keeps you on rails, but how you deliver your next line is dependent upon what that guy just said. And if you don't have that immediate, because in animation we have to reverse engineer everything we do. If in a live action film, you could put the lens on an actor, and then he makes this decision to do this instead of this, and it's a spontaneous decision that he felt in the moment. And in animation, we have to sort of create the illusion that happened in front of the camera. And actually, it's this entire convoluted process to make that feel spontaneous. And so it is a weird way to tell stories and to make movies. But you have to be almost doubly. You have to create the illusion of spontaneity. That actors and are making choices in front of the lens at that moment.
I think that's why it's important that you made the decision to have them all together, so that you can actually capture those little moments that happen fleetingly, and instinctively, reflexively. When there's good chemistry between the cast, they're going to come up with things that you would never possibly be able to think of when you're writing it. And so you want to capitalize on that, right? And so that then the animators can then perfect it and polish that.
Absolutely. And that's why, in so many ways, when in animation we lose there, you don't have that feeling of that something happened that was that turned the sequence. Because what a great actor does is they'll take a moment and you realize, this would be done in a live action film. You wouldn't need that line. All you need is the character to go like that. And you see that when you got everybody in the room. You're like going, you know what? If you don't say a word, but in animation, we're going to make the character, we're going to reverse the angle, and we're going to, even though the other guy's talking, we're on the person listening, and he's digesting what he just heard, and it's more impactful. And it's less wordy, it's less chatty.
Oh, yeah.
It's more impactful to the audience. And so you, as the director, the writer, the showrunner, whatever, you've got to know the process so much that you don't, the end thing that you want is something that is going to be the most impactful for the audience, and you're thinking the most distilled way to get there.
Yeah, it's a very different process between animated feature and film. That film, you can end up with 20 hours of rush, and you kind of find the diamond in this pile of content. As animation, it's atom by atom that you assemble the little diamond in a because it's so, just by the nature of the process of making those, there's way less happy accident that can happen in animated feature, that's for sure.
Absolutely, no doubt about it.
Yeah, you mentioned the lighting and compositing part. How was the discussion with the composer for the music, for instance?
Oh my God! So I had better music than I deserved in this film, and my composer was Elaine Mayrand, who is from Canada, and he scored every bit of this film, and he was one-stop shopping for me, because he ended up being. Whereas he ended up telling the story in an impressionistic sort of way through the music and all that. But here's the thing, is that we usually, and you see in all the behind the scenes things with directors and whatnot, they get to go to the scoring session and they sit with the orchestra and they get all the chills and all this other kind of stuff. I didn't get to do that. So we didn't have any money, right? So, but I wanted to spend the money on a 100-piece orchestra and on Elaine to run without weights on his legs. He could just make that music as big and beautiful as he could. Flying my ass to Budapest, so I could sit there and listen to it, gave him nothing really. So I wanted all that to be. So what we did was, he was in Budapest with a 100-piece orchestra, and I'm streaming this live video from New Zealand. Me and my wife are up at 3 a.m. watching them conduct the orchestra. Elaine and I are chatting via Facebook Messenger. He's directing the orchestra, and it's just, my wife and I are just blown away, even watching it streaming, because we're seeing this gigantic orchestra play. And then after they finished the take, he would Facebook message me.
I love it.
How was that, Kirby? Did you like that? And then I'm like furiously messaging back, looking at the screen, watching this 100-piece orchestra, waiting for my response. and then you see Elaine go, he liked it, and they all clap, and
that's so funny.
And then I get back, it's dark, and I get back in the car and go to bed, but that was that's the thing, you have to have a bullseye view. I had to be very careful, because we could spend some money flying me there, but I'm working for what is going to be on the screen and what people are going to see. And now, since then, and obviously, if I ever get to direct a film where they do fly my ass over there, I'll be happy about that. That'll be great. But that just wasn't an option that I had, and so and I wasn't about to lose any of my financing to spend on things that nobody was going to appreciate sitting in the cinema. So.
Yeah, music is adding such an emotional layer on everything. How did you describe, what was the conversation early on, just to describe what emotion needed to go in what place?
Well, first of all, I love music. I love movie music, and I got my favorite Thomas Newman and these guys that I love. Of course, John Williams is great. Randy Newman, all these guys that do this. And so when I put the Animatic together, I basically took scores from other films and made a soundtrack. Right. So I would just add a soundtrack based upon other. I mean, I was borrowing from every movie you could imagine and putting it in there, and that worked sort of as a. And the thing is, you could fall in love with your temp track, and that's not good because it. And so I had to make sure that this guy could write. He's not just copying other music. I want an original score, but in general, this is a moment in the film where it feels like this. And so he'd go, great. And I say, now write something completely different. But that's generally the feeling. What's interesting is, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this. Most of the references I have for these things are not animated films. But there's this moment, an old Dustin Hoffman film called Marathon. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it.
Yeah, for sure. Is it safe? Is it safe?
Is it safe? And it's just such a great. But there's a fight in that film. There's a fight in that film to where a guy sneaks up behind a guy with a wire and gets him around his neck, and the fight ensues. And there is no music in that fight. All you're hearing is the slap and the breathing, and there's no music, and you are on the edge of your seat because there's certain things that we expect in movies. The music gets dun, 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 and there's a fight. But if you remove that, suddenly emotionally, it has this feeling to it that you feel like you're watching a flippin' fight. And you feel like, oh my God, somebody's going to get hurt. And there was a moment in Mosley where I was like, I know this isn't typical for an animated movie, but I want no music here. And I want us just to feel the slap and collision of bodies and people trying to tear each other apart. And that was a decision. And he was like, well, but I could score that. I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to. And so the temptation, it's always the temptation to just add another layer to things. You know, you got to fight. You've got this guy who's going to write music for it, but you have to say, well, there's just something, I think, when you're given this inexhaustible resources that you've, you know, what is the frame makes the art, or limitation makes art. And so it is true that when you have limitations, you suddenly get very creative. If you have the world, the biggest budget films, usually there's something about a fight in a big budget film, so your eyes glaze over. Why is that should be the biggest moment of the film, you suddenly get bored? It's because there's spectacle everywhere. Yeah. Every corner of the frame is some expensive thing happening. Yeah. And the speakers are booming with music, and it just feels like this onslaught, right? Yeah. And what you want to do is you want to target you want to figure out what is needed here to get the most impact, and what can you do that's unexpected. So in a fight where you expect when the bodies collide that the music ramps up, but instead you take the music out. And now you're feeling, and then slowly you creep it back in as things change in the fight. It's just, this is fun. This is fun stuff. Because we're storytellers, and we want the whole purpose of the movie is to make people feel things. That's it. We want people to feel things. And so we need to be master manipulators at how we make people feel things. And if at some point the process of piling one thing on top of another erases that moment, then you have failed. Because you had too many choices, and you lost your nerve, right? You need to know what you want. And then even though you could do a million things, you're going, yeah, but if I do all that stuff, it's going to take away from this thing. And so it's this constant balancing act of seeing at what point in the movie just because I could do something, does that mean that's the best thing I could do, you know?
Yeah, it's got to take some discipline, I guess. And you have to really know your film too. Like I like this idea of it. Also, I often, when this topic comes up, I usually reference roller coasters, because roller coasters, right, are designed to imagine a roller coaster that doesn't go tick 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 tick
Oh,
as
yeah.
you're you're anticipating the drop. But the other funny thing about that is it's called physics. It's like that is an important part of the actual ride to be able to function properly. So it's like designing something despite its weaknesses and turning those weaknesses into something that's actually got character and it can be exciting and there's all these other things. It's like trying to rather than just, have it plasma, whatever, some sort of cool new anti-grav propulsion system that's just constantly going all the time. And it's like, if you're always exhilarated, then how do you know what exhilaration is? It's like it becomes the same note the entire time, right?
Quentin Tarantino, who is not my favorite filmmaker, but man, that guy can build a moment.
Oh yeah. Oh yes, he can.
So that just even the very opening of Inglourious Bastards,
honestly,
it's all about just, all right, here comes this guy. They're going to sit down. They're going to have a drink. And it's going to end up, as in usually with Quentin Tarantino, with a lot of blood and guns, right?
What?
But
that doesn't seem like him at all.
If it was just all guns and blood from the beginning of the sequence, but no, it's the tick, 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 tick. What you remember about those moments is whether it's in that pub in Inglourious Basterds where they're all playing the game where they put the paper on their heads or whatever it was.
Yeah,
it's building up to what would end up being a very confrontational, violent sort of scenario. But
totally
it's set up. That's why we lost Norm Macdonald yesterday.
Yes, we did. Sadly,
and Norm Macdonald could set up a joke.
Oh yeah, master.
So well, and that's
master.
And so these things are all about setup and payoff, setup and payoff. And if you don't let the setup work as a setup, if you're just so in a hurry to get to the flashbang moment,
totally,
and that flashbang moment, it will not flash or bang like you want it to.
So it's more like
you have to relish, there's foreplay and then there's making love, there's flirting and there's whatever. And we flirt with the audience. We whet their appetite for something. We create anticipation and then we pay it off. And I think a lot of these films, particularly over-processed stuff, which animation tends to, by necessity, be, we lose what our goal is, which is to set things up, create anticipation, and pay them off. So.
Yeah. Everyone in chat, if you have some question, that would be time to put them. But Kirby, I'm interested. Something that we haven't touched at all is what happens once the movie is actually done, because the timing was was a little bit special on this one, wasn't it?
Yeah. So usually, I've been a part of films. I was part of one recently where, you were finishing up the last bit of the movie, and then I swear, like a week later, it's out. Right? You're just getting this and then it bombed at the box office. Right? And so you're like, and mostly has been a slow burn for me because we were released theatrically in New Zealand, Australia, and in South Africa and these other places. We were at Ottawa Film Festival, we were at Annecy and all these places, and we're finally getting to our U.S. distribution, which I'm very excited about. But the fact is I finished this film, oh my God, a year and a half ago. And so, and it's fine. Now, COVID's part of that. And like James Bond finished how long ago, and it's finally going to be released soon. So COVID has something to do with that. The other thing that has to do with that is it's an independently financed film. And our distributor wasn't attached before I finished the film. So, because of the Weinstein thing. Now, again, we were talking about how to keep creative control, and that is something that I'm glad that happened, because I didn't have a distributor writing my back saying, change the ending, it's too dark or whatever. And I finished the film, and there you go. If you want to distribute it, you can distribute it. If you don't. But they weren't writing my back because we hadn't made a deal with them. And so in that regard, I'm still waiting for and anticipating and excited about our U.S. distributor, so that most everybody can finally see the film. And yet, was it work? Did I lose the instant gratification of all the hype that yes, but was it worth it? Yes, it was worth it. Because the movie is about 85-90% what I always hoped it would be. Good or like it or hate it, I'm very happy with how it turned out. And drawing out the but oh my God, just finishing it was like, what do you do now? You know?
Yeah.
And the answer is well, I got a million other stories, and yet, like we just talked about before, I know the journey to get those things done will be in a completely different journey to get those done.
Yeah.
The nice thing is that Mosley is done, and I was just reminding myself of it just recently and looking at it, and I'm going, oh, that still works. Yay, it still works. A little bit of distance, you know how it is. You look at a drawing you did 10 years ago and you're going, oh my God, I'm so much better now than I was then.
Yeah, hopefully that's what you think. It's worse when it's not that.
Yeah.
You're looking at a drawing you did and you're like, oh my God, I was so much better back then.
Well, the thing is my wife is not in this industry at all. And she, for me, represents the general audience.
Right.
And so I'll notice a thing, the lighting could have been a bit better. And she's like going, I don't know what you're talking about. That's cute as hell and it works. And I'm like, all right, I guess it does. So that's good. And so you do. I think somebody said that you never finish a film. You just have to abandon it. You have to stop.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I could have tinkered on this thing forever. I'm glad, however, that there was a stop. And it was weird. I was feeling sick a few days after I did my last thing that I could do for it. And because it's like you're tinkering and the doors coming. It's like Indiana Jones grabbing the hat as the thing goes down. And when I knew I did the last thing I could do for it, it was this vacuum. I was like busyness. And I was like, oh wow, I guess I'm done. I guess I'm finished. And it took a minute.
It really has this feeling of, you're closing a bar, they're opening the light and they're starting to pass the broom and you have this emptiness inside. But yeah, as you said, it's the same thing with animation. I think it's probably the same thing with any art form. I mean, you have to let it go. This is something we were discussing yesterday in our Q&A session. An animator asked, when do you know if you're working on a shot, a personal shot, when do you know it's over? If no one is there to tell you that you should move on. Yeah, it's not easy. Because it's never over. It's just you get to a point that like, okay, this is all right in the way it is, and if I have the chance to do it again, I'm going to try to learn from my experience and do it better and differently.
Well, the next thing you do is always, I think, more evolved and better than the last thing you did. But if you don't stop, you can't have a next thing.
Yeah.
So you do it. I do think it is a thing that creative people need to learn and to make themselves do, is to finish something that they started and do something else. Because you can tinker around with a story or with a shot or whatever you could, but if you want a body of work, you have to be not afraid, I suppose, of letting something go. And at some point, many years down the line, look back at it and go, it's not as good as I thought it was. But how else are you going to grow? I mean, how else? You gotta do other things. You can't just do one thing forever. You gotta move on. And so you pinch it off, you move on to the next thing. And that's what I've been doing these last 2 years. So,
was that pinching? That pinching gesture was like cutting the umbilical, I think. Is that what that was?
That's right. That's what you're doing. Let it out.
I'm wondering. We touched on this a little bit. And there's a great question in chat. We'll get to, and we have a couple in the backlog from some of the questions we got in anticipation for this chat. But really quick, I just wanted to, because I wanted to kind of complete my thought on this, or my more like I want to get a better idea from you as to what it feels like on the opposite end, because we talked a little bit about all the risk, emotional risk, and time, even financial risk that goes into putting the kind of time and energy into something that you may not actually know will go anywhere. And but then, of course, now looking back on it, now that it's complete and done, it's like now, of course, it's subject to the critique of others looking at it. And like, what does that feel like? Because I mean, when you invest that kind of emotional energy into something that's very personal, is it difficult to deal with dissenting opinions on your film?
Completely, yeah. I have a friend, my one director friend, John Davis, who directed Jimmy Neutron, the film, and he directed The Ant Bully for Tom Hanks, and he's been a great friend in that regard. And he made The Ant Bully, and it didn't do well, and critics thought there was some communist propaganda in it. I mean, it's just like, and there's no doubt that, I mean, what is it? It's a website called Letterboxd, I think.
Okay.
Where you can go, and there are people in New Zealand sort of posting their just personal reviews about the film, and there's always people who don't get it, you know, and you're just like, that's okay, you know. But the people who do get it, because John told me, don't read the reviews. we got
usually a good idea.
Yeah. But then I couldn't help it. I mean, when the New Zealand Herald, we were theatrical in New Zealand. When New Zealand Herald gave the film 4 stars, I'm like going, I got to read that review.
Yeah, of course.
You know, and so I did, and it felt great. And so I'm like going, well, I know some people like it now. and now I just need to ready myself for the fact that some people won't.
Yeah.
And, but the fact that certain people were very attached to it and very emotionally moved by it.
It's like they got it, right?
Yeah. So I guess if nobody gets your film, maybe that's a problem. But but somebody's going to get it. In fact, a whole lot of people will probably.
That's it. Like, you can't make everybody happy. So I don't know, because I've never put together that big of a personal, project and put it out there into the world. It's got to be a little bit anxiety provoking, just because it's like.
How about this? I mean, like, I keep going on about my 6-year-old kid who did this fantastic performance.
Oh, right.
I read somebody's review. It's like, that kid is so annoying.
Great.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Say what you will about me, but you take your friggin' filthy little fingers off of my friggin', saying these nasty things about my daughter online. Like, forget about it.
Yeah, and so at that point you're like going, all right. So, but you absolutely need to have a resilience toward. You have to believe in your stuff, in a way that you're going. There are people. If I feel this, I know other people will feel it too, and you're working for those folks. But to be honest, most of there's only a few criticisms that I've read that I'm going, that's a good point. That's good. So it's not like, and as there's one thing somebody had a question about the end. Well, what about this? The end didn't address this, and I'm like, I made a choice to not address that, and now looking back, I'm going, maybe I should have addressed that, and so that's okay.
Hindsight's 20/20 too, though, right? Like, it's like, how do you?
Yeah, but the thing is if we're so emotionally, we need to have. I think it was Guillermo del Toro who said that an artist needs to have the heart of a poet and the resilience of a boxer. And if you just have the resilience of a boxer, you're an asshole. Or you may be an asshole, yeah. Or you're making corporate fodder. If you just have the heart of a poet, then you're too sensitive for the world, and you're never going to get your work out there because you're too scared. You need to have both going on at the same time. You need to have this resilience to you, to where you can take a punch, and you also need to have this part of you that is uber sensitive, probably more sensitive than your friends. Yeah, because you're a creative person. Yeah. So get used to the fact that. Get used to that paradox, because that you need both. You need to be uber sensitive in a way that probably a CPA isn't, right? And you need to have the heart of a poet, and yet you need to be able to take a punch, have this sort of objective part of you that goes, totally. Was that deserved, in the sense that maybe I need to listen to what they're saying. Totally. And then the other part of you that is like, screw you, I know what I'm doing. Yeah. And you need to have all that stuff active in you at the same time. Yeah. And that's what I think makes you productive in the world. Otherwise you're going to hide in a hole and do all your little drawings and make all little stuff, and no one's ever going to see it.
Yeah. Delicate balance, that's for sure. I like the analogy of the boxer. So like you have to let some of those punches through, otherwise you don't grow, right? It's like, but how do you in real time filter which punches get through and which ones don't? That's not easy. I mean, all artists have to deal with this. This is very true because everyone gets critiqued. They usually have supervisors. Animators are always getting their work reviewed, and they have to come up with that same kind of balance.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's jump over questions if that's cool with you, David.
Yeah, let's go. Let's start with the backlog, maybe.
Oh, okay. I was going to jump in with the first one in chat, but we can do that. Okay, backlog. All right. So this first one here is from Joker Cletus, and it is quite straightforward of a question. How do you practice writing as a student? I assume this is maybe someone who's flirting with the idea of writing, either as a career or maybe as a side thing like you, but basically like, where do you even start if you're interested?
Well, I'm assuming this is writing for screenplays, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's safe to assume that.
So if it's writing for screenplays, read a great screenplay. If whatever movie you love, find that screenplay and read that screenplay, and you know what you saw on the screen. So you have to sort of think of it backwards. You know why this moment worked for you on the screen. Now you're going to deconstruct it to the point to where somebody wrote that moment. How did they write it? And usually there's formatting that is unique to screenwriting that's different than other writing, and so you got to learn that kind of stuff. But then also you have to learn. You basically are writing in a different way than you write for anything else. You're trying to put the general rule is that it's a page per minute of the film. And so you basically are writing in a way that is going to play a movie in somebody's head. So it ends up being very choppy and almost a bit like haiku or poetry or something. That you're describing something in a way that puts a picture in somebody's mind, and the act of reading it was almost as fast as the act of seeing it if it were on. So it's a very specific discipline, but the best advice I could give you is to read a great screenplay, and then start writing, and always have the other thing next to you. And so you're going, is what I wrote just as compelling as this thing? Because if it's not, then you need to keep working, and you need to keep working. You need to keep honing that craft, because it takes the general rule is that you have to write a lot of shit before you write one good thing. And so philosophically, I suppose, let's go ahead and get that shit out so we can write the good thing. If you never write the bad thing, then you still haven't done that, and you can't get to so go ahead and get that out of you as quick as you can, so that you can start writing the good stuff. But if you never start writing because you're too scared of how bad it's going to be, then you're never going to improve and get to the point where it's actually pretty good. So.
You need to take some writing laxative to get all that shit out as quickly.
Usually a lot of bowel movement.
I like it. You're speaking my language. Okay, well, you actually just answered. We got a 2-for-1 there because you just answered the second question, which was I'll bring it up just so everyone has the benefit of seeing it. But it was exactly the question of how does it translate a page for seconds or minutes of screen time, and you already answered that. A page per minute, give or take.
A page per minute, so that it's about 120 pages for a feature, and they usually knock that down to about 90 pages for an animated feature.
Yeah, and I guess and you already answered the first part of this question too, which is sort of how to write a great script is first understand how the structure. I mean, I think another good idea probably would be to you might have said this, I'm not too sure, but pick a favorite movie, and then so the one that you know really well, and then read that script so you can start to be like, oh, I see how it translates. It's like that's the blueprint to the film, and you need to kind of be able to compare and see how those two things sort of play off of one another, I would assume.
Read the Shawshank Redemption. Read the Green Mile. Read these scripts that are iconic now because they're so effective as a piece of storytelling.
Yeah.
And you will find that script is just as compelling as the film. So how do you learn the craft of being able to write that way? So.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to jump back into chat here then, because we can. I'm going to go and grab Scott's question here. So you've been talking about the ethereal and have been quoting some of my favorite quotes. So I have to know, what are your favorite books and what do you have on your bookshelf?
Oh, geez. Oh my God. Well, I love me some Cormac McCarthy. You guys know Cormac McCarthy?
I know. I've never read any.
I know of. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, his books that have been turned into films are No Country for Old Men.
Yeah.
Uh,
Such a good movie.
Is one, but he's very William Faulkner-esque, and so he's, as far as that is concerned, he is just a fantastic writer and elicits all of these fantastic mood. It's just such mood in what he writes.
Oh, yeah.
This on the other end of the spectrum, I love G.K. Chesterton, and I love recently I'm always a big Tolkien is great if you love fantasy, because what I think when people get into fantasy, and animation tends to lean toward this, and effects driven sort of films tend to lean toward this, what makes Lord of the Rings still resonate to this day is because the book isn't about cool swords and battles.
No, exactly.
It's about very awkward friends having to learn to be brave.
Yeah.
And ennobling themselves and doing things that they never thought that they could do. That's all that movie's about. That's all that book is about. And so the reason why we always return to those books is that they fill us with that sense of homeliness and coziness, and then moving out of the cozy place into the dangerous place, and having to do things that feel way beyond you, and accomplishing them anyway. And so that's why we return to that stuff. I mean, you ask what books are on my shelf. I mean, I do a whole lot of reading, but the thing that comes to mind, if you're just looking for evocative sort of writing, Cormac McCarthy, Blood Meridian film is a book that it's unfilmable.
Unfilmable. I like that.
It's unfilmable, but
is that a challenge?
It will haunt the living crap out of you. That book will. Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy, and I've adopted a couple of books that I love into screenplay. One is The Man Who Was Thursday, which is this steampunk spy story written by G.K. Chesterton. It's fantastic. So get a look at that. I mean, there's but writing. I recommend reading something that is old, and so that you're just not a product of the contemporary stuff that's coming out. So if your whole film diet or book diet is just current stuff, I think you're robbing yourself of getting or fortifying your imagination. So for every Marvel film you watch A Man for All Seasons with Paul Scofield. It's a great film. Watch it. It's a talky film, but it's a great film. And watch something that is not current popular franchisey kind of stuff. Read something that is different, and you'll fortify your imagination. And then when you return to what's popular, you could add more substance to it than what we normally. I've written a lot of movies and hired to be writing movies that I'm like going, I don't necessarily believe in this movie, but what ends up being the thing that guides me through doing that is going, well, what if I made it better than anybody expected it to be?
Yeah.
What if we did that? And you do that, but from drawing upon this sense of what quality is, and you only know that by running into quality stuff and interacting with it. So.
God forbid it'll be possibly fresh too, like going tapping into like much older material. It'll just be like, because things go in waves, right? Like there's like the industry tends to get caught up in the same themes, and it's like it's just prolific, the same theme. It's like Hollywood's terrible for this. It's like there was like, I remember that phase where it was like the natural disaster one, where it was like all these movies were like about like either floods or about the earth dying or a meteor coming in to hit the planet. They all came out like for the same year, so it's like that's what happens. Things just sort of end up like spinning around in circles.
The last film I saw that it seems like that this is an old film too, but There Will Be Blood is a film. Yeah. After I watched it, it's clung to me like when you walk through a spider web and you're like,
oh yeah, for sure.
For weeks, I was thinking about that movie, and that's the kind of movies. Those are the kind of stories I want to tell. I want to tell the sort of stories that after you watched it, it's clinging to you for weeks. You're like thinking about it and you can't quit thinking about it. And I need to go back and see that. Or there's a moment I missed. There's of course, the Coen brothers are great.
The best.
The Ballad of Buster Scruggs on Netflix that you can watch right now is amazing.
Blood Simple's a great movie. If you've ever seen that one.
Anything Coen brothers is well written, usually incredibly well written and directed. I mean, just even if you just go into straight comedy, if you do Raising Arizona, it get any better than Raising Arizona. That's just the best,
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, quick follow-up question then from Scott here is is there a good resource online that people can go to get their hands on screenplays? If that's the advice, where is there a good place to get them? Like, are they published somewhere?
Yeah, I think there are several websites I think that you can go to. I don't know I don't necessarily go to these websites. I'm not even sure they exist anymore. But I always refer people to check out John August, his website. He's got a podcast called Script Notes, and but John August wrote Big Fish and some films like that. And if you go to I think he has a library of at least the films that he's written, and but I swear if you look up whatever screenplay whatever movie you like, if you look up blah 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 script PDF, something's going to pop up and you'll probably find it, somewhere or other.
Yeah. Oh, you're muted.
Oh yeah, I hit my mute button by accident. So Scott looks like he found he riffed on what you just said there, and he already found a little treasure trove. So that's awesome. We're pretty much wrapping up. I think it would be probably a good idea to thank you for your time right now. It was an interesting and exciting journey. A kind of a roller coaster of types, just to sort of get an idea as to what kind of world you've been living in to be able to produce something that means obviously so much to you. I haven't seen the movie. I'd like to go see it quite a bit, especially now having heard a lot of the personal parts of it. It's like I can't not. It's just that idea, this thought of you spending time with your daughter and making that, maybe because I have a 6-year-old, so I think that probably resonates with me. And I would love to do something like that with her because it would be so cool. I'm gonna rush out and try to get my hands on it and see it. But thank you for sharing that personal journey with us. It was awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if anybody wants to, it's coming. I promise you, the film's coming to the US. It's coming. But if anybody wants to see clips or get a sense of the film, if you go to the Kirby.Atkins.com website, and then there's a tab for Mosley. There's lots of video and clips and
there's
stuff.
Also a Mosley movie official website too. I think they could go to. Yeah, is that a recognized official website, or is that maybe not?
I don't know. I think it was sort of abandoned by the studio that put
Mosley
it up.
Movie.
Is out of business. So I think, so I think there you go. There's a link up there. Yeah. And if you go there and then to the Mosley tab and scroll down, there'll be a history. There'll be story. There'll be outtakes from the actors and stuff like that, but there's also some clips that'll whet your appetite for hopefully this Christmas. It'll be everybody can watch it.
Crossing the fingers.
I would just want to say that everything that we described for reading a screenplay while we've watched a movie, anyone that is interested to do storyboarding, go see those Animatic once you've seen the movie, to kind of see what is expected in the best case scenario from a production team of before you dive into production, of how you put a story in visual form and audio. That's pretty great stuff.
You can pretty much make a movie with After Effects and Photoshop.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, just like this, so easy.
Yeah, and yet it very rarely happens that you go in production and you have such a well refined medium to rely on too. So go check it out for sure.
Well, thanks, guys.
Okay.
It's been a blast. Obviously, I could talk about this stuff forever, so I appreciate you giving me the chance. So,
well, we're glad that you could talk about it forever, and I'd like to think that we can drag you back in here at some point and have a rehash. Especially, I'm going to be very curious to see have a conversation with you after he does get that release, because I think there was going to have some revelations to be had at that point, and that would be amazing. I think so. It's going to be cool.
Yeah, let's do that again after you watch the movie, Brent, and we can start that discussions with. So Kirby, about this ending, what?
Yes, please allow me to then personally pick apart the film. That would be really great. I'm sure that would be very enjoyable for you. That'd be really great. Okay, well, thank you, Kirby.
Awesome.
Thank you very, very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. David, enjoy the rest of your day. And chat, thanks for being here. We'll see you on the next one, and enjoy the rest of your days. Cheers, everybody.
Bye, Kirby. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Hey.